Welcome back to the Application Lifecycle Development course. In this lesson, we're going to set up continuous deployment for our staging stack. So we just set up our development stack, and we had to go through a few iterations. And we actually have a couple of tasks to look at to make sure we clean it up and make sure it's right. And I kind of put this into the staging part for a couple of reasons. One, because we did a lot in development. So I want to kind of give you a break for a little bit. But also because in the staging area, that's where you really want to make sure that the process we have is correct, is the way we want it, because we're going to make a copy of it. So let's go right to Azure DevOps, go to our pipeline release, and look at that release for development. So let's hit edit here, and just make sure that everything here is exactly the way we want it. We have our variables, we just have 4, we have our connection strings, our username and password, and the options set up are just fine. We don't have any integrations yet. And our tasks themselves, we have that replace, which is just generic. It just goes to any config file. We have the Azure deployment, which is fine, and the SQL Server publish, which again works just fine. So it looks like everything's set up the way we want it to. So now it's time to actually make a staging version of this. So let's go ahead and select development. And then it's ellipsis right here. We can say clone. This is really helpful, but just be careful. Just like copy and paste in code, it's something you have to look out for, that you don't accidentally leave development settings in your staging process. So hit clone. We're going to rename this. So we're going to name this the development. The staging. But I forget the full name. Now make sure you get it's called just development. So let's call it staging. So we're going to call this staging. And now we need to look at the continuous deployment trigger, which is on the master branch. That's not the branch we want. What we want is the staging branch, which we don't have a staging branch yet. So let's go ahead and create a staging branch. That way it's here for us to do that. So we'll do that in just a minute. Next, we need to come over here to development. Change this to staging. Now I could have done this process in one pipeline. So I could have said we're just going to move from development to staging to production. I didn't want to do that for the whole process because of the fact that we want to push a dev a lot. But that doesn't mean that every time I push a dev, they should go all the way through to production. We might want to wait until we have quite a few commits pushed to dev before we move on to even staging. So that's why we're going to do a separate copy for this. Let's look at the job and tasks. So in here, we're doing the same generic config transform, so that's fine. We'll look at variables in a minute. Our Azure DevOps, well, it's similar, but we want to do a different service name for this. So we'll take care of that. Notice it's grayed out here. So we make a change, but I believe the change is up here 1 level higher, or actually 2. There we go. On staging itself, it says app service name. We want to change that to LP staging. And now down here, that's what we're pushing to, and it's all good. The path remains the same for the package folder. And the Azure publish is similar, but we need to make sure you publish to the correct database. So the database name is not dev, it is staging. So LP staging user DB. Just make sure that's correct. And now we have to look at our variables. Notice the red exclamation point. Because all of these don't actually have values. So we need to change all of them. I don't think it tells you exactly why there's errors in there. Let me just look real quick. They're not copied. Okay. So basically it's saying, hey, these variables, they're not actually there. So let's unlock them all. And notice I unlock, they empty out. And now I can actually put our values in here for staging. Let me go ahead and pause the video and paste them all in. So of course it's not recorded on video, but yeah, it's secure. Okay, all 4 in there. I got the connection strings from Azure, which it really is the same connection string as previous. It's just that instead of the dev database, it's now a staging database for both auth and user. The username and password is the same because we're pulling it right from the SQL Server itself. That's the username and password we're using. And the SQL username and password is the same because it's the same server. So in some ways, it's kind of a bummer it didn't copy. We would like to have these two copied over, and we could have gone and created variables at a higher level, but that's okay. This is just fine, and it will work, and it's saved now for staging. We didn't make any other changes to our pipeline, so now we can hit save. And the only thing that we still have to do is this continuous deployment. So let's do that first. So let's open up our project. What I'm going to do is, and this is where I like the command line better. So open command line at this location. And there we go. Now, if you don't have that, you can just open a command prompt and go to this, whatever path it is, to your lifecycle project. And it is a command prompt, it's not the bash, but if I do git status, it still tells me I'm on master branch and it's origin master. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a separate branch, a long running branch that we always use for staging. Let's call it staging. So again, this is where the command line really shines. I want to do git checkout-b, which means create the branch and then check out to it. Staging. So it's created a branch and it's checked it out, and we're now on the staging branch. So now we have our staging branch, and it has all the same stuff. We do a directory here. It's got all the same stuff as master, because when you create a new branch, it takes whatever branch you're currently in and takes a copy of that and puts it in the new branch. And that's the starter code for that new branch. So it's on the same commit level as master is. Normally, when I'm here, what I would do is do git merge master. But since I just every time, I can just say git push, and we're good to go. So I hit enter, it will create that branch on the remote server and push all of our changes. Now, it didn't seem to do anything. It didn't send a whole bunch of files because it knows what commit it's on, and the remote repository has all those commits. So it doesn't have to push any files actually. Like I said before, Git is really intelligent about how it deals with network traffic. So let's move this off of actually, let's go back now. Git checkout master. So we're back in the master branch. And notice your branch is up to date with origin/master. So that's the link we're comparing it to. So now nothing else has changed, but when you see branch right here, if I click on it, we can also select staging. Now I could have said new branch and I could have tried to do it that way. I just find it easier to do it from the command line. It's up to you how you want to do it. But now we can go back to our Azure DevOps, and in this continuous deployment trigger, we can say for branches, well, you're going to have to refresh it, I think, but let's say staging. There we go. So it did find it eventually, I think, but that should now trigger off of staging builds. So it only triggers off staging, whereas the other one only triggers off of master. So now we can hit save, and we'll say initial creation of pipeline. And now we're done. So now we have a staging build. And this is called new release pipeline. That's not right. So that would be the master pipeline. Let's go ahead and edit that and change that to actually stay, instead of new release, we're going to say development. Let's call these pipelines. Development pipeline. And then let's come back to all pipelines and rename this one staging pipeline. Okay, and now they match. I like to have things that are matched because of the fact that it lets you build expectations for what things are. So now we have our development, which gets kicked off from master. We have staging, which gets kicked off from our staging branch. It's already kicking off once. And that's because we already have that first push into staging. So it immediately got triggered. We can watch this in progress. And it should work just fine because of the fact that, let's go really quick to our database here. It should work fine because of the fact that everything's the same. Let's open up staging. Any tables there. Transitioning from state of succeeded, is not allowed. Well, that's because it didn't refresh the page. Look at that. So it only lasted 4 minutes and 7 seconds. So that's just a case where the web page just locked up and not the actual job itself. Okay, so I was just kind of sitting here waiting for it to be done, and it's already done. So it deployed that one table, and we're good to go. We can go ahead and launch back the SQL Server Management Studio and make sure that, in fact, that is there. So let me go ahead and bring that over and look at the staging user database and make sure, in fact, it does have that one table for people. I'll open a query window as well. And it does have a table. Select star from dbo.person table. And it has 3 entries, Tim, Sue, and Bob. So excellent. We've got our table deployed. We've got our staging pipeline working. That's really all there was to it. I mean, it's pretty simple stuff once you have one pipeline working. Because now you can go to your pipelines, you can see both pipelines, and kind of watch the process for each because they will be different. So we have one build for everything. And we can tweak the build if we need to just once, and it works for everybody. It builds both master and staging. And then we have a release pipeline for development and for staging. So that's it for this lesson. And the next lesson, we're going to set up the production environment, or release environment.